The sky above Zurich burned red. Smoke rose from shattered towers, and the ground trembled with the last echo of heavy bombardments. The war had reached its final stage. Armies that once marched proudly now scattered like dust in the storm. Commander Nero lay among the ruins, her body broken. She had led the charge with courage, never stepping back even when her soldiers hesitated. Her people looked to her as a symbol of strength. But symbols, she now realized, were only useful when they stood tall. Once fallen, they were left behind. Her chest burned with every breath. A deep cut ran across her side, and the armor she once trusted was nothing more than broken metal clinging to her skin. She lifted her head, hoping to see her unit coming back for her. Instead, she saw their transports rising into the smoke-filled sky, engines glowing as they abandoned the battlefield. "Wait," she whispered, her voice too weak to carry. Her hand reached out, trembling, but there was no one to grasp it. The ships disappeared into the clouds. The sound of their engines faded. And with them went her hope. For a long moment, Nero lay silent. The only sounds were the crackle of distant fires and the groans of collapsing walls. The air smelled of ash and dust. She was the highest-ranking officer on this front, yet now she was nothing but a forgotten body on a dying world. Betrayal cut deeper than the wound in her side. She had fought for her people, shed blood for them, and believed in their cause with every breath. And still, when she needed them most, they had chosen to leave her. She closed her eyes, her thoughts turning bitter. So this is how it ends. Not in glory. Not in honor. Just silence. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. She could not tell. Pain dulled her sense of time. Darkness crept at the edge of her vision. She wondered if death would be kind, if it would come quietly and save her from the weight of despair. But then footsteps. At first, she thought it was only her imagination. Perhaps the sound of rubble shifting in the wind. But no. They were steady. Heavy. Measured. A rhythm of boots against stone. Someone was walking closer. Her hand reached weakly for the blade at her side, though she barely had strength to lift it. Her heart pounded. Were they enemies? Scavengers? Would she die not in silence, but under another's hand? A shadow appeared through the smoke. Tall. Broad-shouldered. The figure paused as if scanning the ruins. Then, slowly, he stepped into the dim light. It was a human. Nero blinked in disbelief. Of all the species scattered across the stars, it was humanity she saw standing over her. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with ash, and his left arm hung limp from some earlier wound. But his eyes were sharp, alive, and searching. For a moment, they simply stared at one another. She expected him to raise a weapon, to finish what her enemies had started. Instead, he crouched beside her. "You're still alive," he said, his voice steady. His words were simple, but there was no mockery in them. Only fact. Nira tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Why are you here?" "Separated from my unit," he replied. His gaze moved across her wounds, calculating, measuring. He tore a strip of cloth from his own sleeve, pressing it against her side to slow the bleeding. She winced, the pain sharp, but his hands were firm and careful. She could not understand. She was not his ally. Her people had fought against humans for years. Why would he help her? You should leave me," she whispered. "I am your enemy." He glanced at her, his eyes calm, but filled with something she had never seen before. Not coldness. Not pity. Something else, resolve. "No one deserves to die alone," he said simply. The words struck her deeper than any blade. For her people, leaving behind the weak was considered practical, even necessary. Survival was always placed above compassion. To be abandoned was not shocking in her culture, it was expected. And yet, this human, who owed her nothing, refused to let her die. Nira tried to protest, but her strength failed her. Darkness pushed at her vision again. She heard the sound of cloth tearing, felt the pressure of his hands binding her wound, and the faint vibration of his breathing close by. As her eyes closed, her last thought before losing consciousness was not of betrayal, not of despair, but of confusion. Why would a human care for me? The battlefield around them lay silent, but in that silence, something had begun. A fragile bond, born not of alliance or command, but of one human's choice to stand beside someone left behind. And that choice, though she did not yet know it, would change her life forever. When Nira woke, the world was no longer burning red. Instead, a pale light slipped through cracks in the ruined ceiling above her. The smell of ash still lingered, but the air felt cooler. She shifted slightly and realized something strange. Her wound was covered, bound with tight cloth, and her breathing was no longer shallow. For a moment she wondered if her people had returned for her, but then she heard the sound of footsteps nearby. Heavy, slow, dragging slightly. Not the precise march of her soldiers, but the uneven tread of one man carrying too much weight. The human. He stepped into view, his clothes torn further since she last saw him. Dust clung to his skin, and his arms still hung at an odd angle, but his eyes were sharp, alert, scanning the horizon through a hole in the broken wall. He carried no grand medical kit, only a few scraps of cloth and a small ration pack clipped to his belt. When he saw her awake, his face softened. "You're alive," he said, almost with relief. Nira blinked at him. Her throat felt dry, her voice weak. "Why did you save me?" He shrugged as if it were obvious. "Because you were dying. And I was here." She tried to push herself up, but pain surged through her side. He quickly moved closer, steadying her with his good arm. His touch was careful, not forceful. She had never felt such gentleness in the middle of war. "You shouldn't move too much," he told her. "The wound will open again." Nira stared at him in silence. Her people taught that survival came first, that those who slowed the group were left behind. It was not cruelty, they said, it was necessity. She had accepted that logic all her life. And yet here was this human, weakened, separated from his own, still choosing to protect someone who should have been his enemy. "Your name?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft. "Callan," he replied. Then, after a pause, he added, "And you?" "Nira." He nodded. "Good. Then we are not strangers anymore." The word surprised her. Not strangers. To her, every human had always been a stranger. Their ways were strange, their choices strange. They risked themselves for others in ways that made no sense. Yet when Callan said it, his tone was steady, as if trust could be built on nothing more than a name. Hours passed slowly. Callan shared his water with her, pressing the flask into her hands even though his lips were cracked with thirst. He gave her half his ration bar, pretending he was not hungry, though his stomach growled loudly in the quiet. Nira could only watch in silence, unable to understand. Finally, she asked, "Why not keep it for yourself? You need strength more than I do." Callan shook his head. "Strength is useless if I watch someone die beside me. We survive together, or not at all." The words echoed in her mind. Together. Her people had no word that meant the same. To them, bonds were transactions, exchanges of power or duty. But here, in the middle of a ruined world, a human soldier offered her something else. A bond with no condition. As night fell, Callan set a small light in the corner of the shelter, its glow soft and warm against the stone. He kept watch, sitting near the entrance, scanning the shadows for movement. Nero lay still, pretending to sleep, but she watched him carefully. He leaned back against the wall, exhausted, but did not allow his eyes to close for more than a moment. Even broken and far from his people, he remained alert, protecting her. At last, unable to hold her question, she whispered, "Why? Why do humans do this? Why do you risk yourselves for others, even for those who are not your kind?" Callan turned his head, meeting her gaze. His eyes were tired, but his voice carried quiet strength. "Because one day, I might be the one lying in the dirt, waiting for help. And I would hope someone would choose not to walk away." His words fell into the silence between them, heavy and true. Nira closed her eyes, not because she was tired, but because she could not hold his gaze any longer. She had been left by her own people, abandoned without hesitation. Yet this man, who had every reason to leave her, had chosen to stay. She thought of the transports flying away, of the engines roaring as her people escaped without her. Their logic had been clear: leave the weak, save the strong. She had accepted it without question. But now, with Callan beside her, she began to wonder if strength meant something different than she had been taught. The fire outside the ruins dimmed into embers. The night air grew cold. Nira drifted into uneasy sleep, but her last thought before the darkness claimed her was not of betrayal. It was of the human sitting at the door, broken but unyielding, keeping watch so she could breathe another day. And for the first time since the battle, she felt a fragile spark of hope. The morning sun broke through the smoky clouds, casting a weak light over the ruins of Zirith. Nira sat up slowly, wincing as her side protested. The bandages Callan had tied the night before had held, but pain still pulsed with every movement. She looked around the ruined shelter and realized just how alone they were. Callan was already awake. He had moved a few feet away, scanning the distant horizon through the cracks in the stone wall. His face was pale from lack of sleep, his arm still hanging awkwardly at his side. Yet, somehow, he managed a small smile when he saw her stir. "Morning," he said, his voice rough but steady. "How do you feel?" "Better, barely," Nira admitted. She tried to sit fully upright, but pain shot through her torso. Callan quickly came to her side and steadied her. "You have to rest," he said. "We cannot risk more injuries." "I can't just lie here," Nira said. "We are still in enemy territory. If they find us," Callan shook his head. "We move slowly. Carefully. We survive first, then worry about the rest." The words were simple, but they carried authority. She noticed something about humans she had never understood before: their calm in chaos, their focus on what they could do rather than what they feared. With his help, she stood. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her body, but Callan held her arm, keeping her steady. The ruins stretched endlessly, walls half destroyed, smoke rising from scattered fires. The battlefield had become a graveyard, littered with wreckage and forgotten machines. "Where will we go?" Nira asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Anywhere but here," he said. "We need water, food, and shelter." They moved slowly through the debris, avoiding open spaces. Nira noticed how Callan scanned every corner, every shadow, every piece of cover. It was not just caution, it was strategy. Though he was alone with her, he treated the ruined world as a battlefield, and she realized he expected danger at every step. Hours passed as they made their way through the broken city. Nira's strength returned little by little, but her muscles ached, and her lungs burned with every climb over rubble. Callan offered her water from his flask, breaking it into small sips. He shared his remaining food as well, dividing the meager rations with care. Nira was ashamed at how small the portions were, but he refused to take more for himself. "You need it more than I do," he said simply. "And besides," he added with a faint grin, "you're heavier than you look. Carrying you isn't easy." Nira couldn't help but let out a short laugh, even though it hurt. She realized that despite the exhaustion, the fear, the chaos around them, the human beside her was steady. He joked, he planned, and he kept her alive when her own people had abandoned her without hesitation. Night approached again, colder and quieter this time. They found an old storage building with walls mostly intact. Callan checked for traps, debris, or enemy scouts before letting Nira settle. She lay on the cold floor, shivering from fatigue, but the presence of the human beside her offered warmth she hadn't realized she needed. "You'll have to sleep for a while," Callan said. "I'll keep watch." Nira nodded, too tired to argue. As she closed her eyes, she noticed his movements, how he arranged the rubble to block the door, how he listened intently to every sound. Even wounded and alone, he acted as if nothing could stop him from keeping her safe. The hours passed slowly, filled with quiet vigilance. Shadows moved outside the broken windows, and strange noises echoed from the ruins, but Callan remained alert, standing when necessary, scanning, listening. Nira felt a strange mixture of fear and admiration. She had survived battles before, but never had she experienced such care, such relentless determination from another being. By morning, Nira's strength had returned enough for her to walk without leaning on him constantly. They moved again, seeking a small stream Callan had spotted from the ruins. The journey was slow and difficult. They climbed over fallen towers, crossed half-destroyed bridges, and avoided patrols that might still be searching for survivors. Each step tested Nira's endurance, but the human beside her never faltered. At one point, Nira almost stumbled into a shallow pit filled with debris. Callan grabbed her arm instantly, steadying her before she could fall. His hands were rough from battle, but careful, and his eyes met hers with quiet reassurance. "You're doing fine," he said. "Keep going. You can do this." For the first time since she had been left behind, Nira felt a spark of hope. She realized that survival did not come from power, armor, or strategy alone. It came from care, courage, and someone willing to stand by your side when all else had abandoned you. By the time they reached the small stream, Nira could walk without leaning on him fully. She drank water cautiously, savoring each sip. Callan smiled when he saw her regain her strength, though he remained alert, watching the shadows and listening for danger. For the first time since the battle, Nira allowed herself to believe she might live. Not just survive, but live. And she knew, without a doubt, that her life had been saved by the courage of one human who had chosen to stand beside her when everyone else had walked away. And in that realization, she felt something new stirring inside her, gratitude, respect, and the beginning of trust. Days passed slowly on the ruined world of Zeroth. The battlefield had become a harsh landscape of ash, twisted metal, and broken buildings. Nira and Callan had found a small hidden valley, far enough from patrols and the remnants of the fighting, where they could rest and regain some strength. Yet even here, survival was a constant effort. Each morning, Callan would scout the area, searching for food and water. He moved carefully, silent, always alert to danger. Nira noticed the precision in his actions, the way he crouched behind rocks, listened to the wind, and watched every movement in the distance. Every small step he took was calculated to keep them both alive. "You don't have to do this alone," Nira said one morning as they prepared to move to a nearby stream. She had grown stronger, able to walk without leaning on him constantly, but her side still ached with every step. Callan looked at her calmly. "I'm not alone," he said. "Not when you're here." The words struck her. In her culture, soldiers often worked in teams, but bonds were measured by duty, by rank, or by orders. This human, though, spoke as if their survival together was not about orders, but about choice. As they walked through the valley, Nira observed him closely. His uniform was torn and dirty, yet he maintained an air of focus and discipline that seemed almost impossible given the situation. He shared his food with her without hesitation, offered water when she was thirsty, and never complained, even when his own arm throbbed with pain. "You're remarkable," she said quietly one evening as they rested near a small fire. "Even wounded, you never falter." Callan smiled faintly. "I don't think of it that way," he replied. "I just keep moving. There's no other choice if we want to survive." Nero wanted to understand more. "Humans, you trust so easily. Why? Even when it's dangerous?" He stared into the fire for a moment, then looked at her. "Because trust is worth more than fear. Fear will keep you alive for a while, but trust gives life meaning. And sometimes, helping someone is the only way to survive yourself." Nero listened, feeling the weight of his words. She realized that she had been taught to survive through logic and strategy, through leaving behind what was weak or inconvenient. Yet here was a human, guiding her, feeding her, protecting her not because he had to, but because he chose to. The days blended into nights. They scavenged what they could from abandoned ruins, drinking from small streams, and hunting small creatures that roamed the valley. Every evening, Callan would patch Nira's wounds and check her condition, even as he treated his own injuries. Slowly, Nira began to trust him fully. She no longer doubted that he would act to protect her, even at the cost of his own safety. One evening, a storm rolled in, dark clouds and wind battering the valley. They found shelter in a half-collapsed bunker. Rain and wind rattled the walls, and the small fire they built flickered under the force of the storm. Nira shivered, her teeth chattering from cold and fatigue. Callan noticed immediately. He tore a strip from his own uniform and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Here," he said gently. "Keep warm. You'll need your strength tomorrow." She looked at him, eyes wide. "You do this, for me?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because you are not alone anymore." The human's courage and kindness had already saved her life once, but now she saw something more profound. A bond was forming between them. Not a bond of orders or duty, but of trust and care. In a world where everyone else had abandoned her, this human had chosen to stand by her. The storm raged through the night, but Nira slept easier than she had in days. She felt safe, protected not just by his strength, but by the quiet determination that radiated from him. She began to understand that the human way of caring, their relentless commitment to others, was not weakness. It was strength, the kind of strength her own people could not understand. When the morning came, the storm had passed, leaving the valley wet and glistening. They moved again, finding higher ground to survey the area. Nira walked beside him, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She had once believed that survival meant fighting alone, that weakness was left behind. Now she realized she had been wrong. Survival meant standing together, helping one another, and trusting someone else to hold you up when you could not stand alone. Callan looked at her as they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. "We'll make it," he said. "One step at a time. Together." Nira nodded, understanding the truth of his words. For the first time since the battle, she felt hope not just for survival, but for something deeper. Something she could not yet name, but something she would carry forward with her. The bond between them had grown stronger in the fires of hardship. She had been abandoned by her own people, left to die. But this human had chosen her, and through that choice, had shown her a strength far greater than anything she had known. And in that realization, Nira understood that their journey had only begun. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, stronger for the bond forged in fire, trust, and courage. The valley had grown quiet after the storm. Mist curled over the rocks, and the distant mountains looked like shadows in the early morning light. Nira and Callan moved carefully through the damp terrain, alert to every sound. Though the battle had ended days ago, danger still lingered. Enemy patrols often roamed the ruins, searching for survivors. Nira noticed how careful Callan was. His eyes constantly scanned the horizon, his ears tuned to every rustle of leaves, every distant sound. Even in exhaustion, he remained vigilant, moving with a quiet strength that reminded her of why he had saved her in the first place. "Do you think they'll find us?" she asked quietly, trying not to let fear creep into her voice. Callan shook his head. "If we stay alert, we can avoid them. But we can't relax for even a moment. They'll be looking for anyone left behind." The valley grew narrower as they continued, with cliffs rising on either side. Mist clung to the rocks, making every step slippery. Nira struggled to keep her balance, wincing as her side ached with each movement. Callan remained close, ready to steady her if she stumbled. Hours passed with only the sound of their boots and the occasional bird call. But then, a noise in the distance caught their attention, a faint hum, almost mechanical, like a scanning device moving across the valley. Callan froze instantly, signaling Nira to do the same. "They're close," he whispered. "We need to hide." Nira's heart pounded as they crouched behind a large boulder. Through the mist, she could see faint figures moving. Her own people. She had been abandoned once, left to die. And now, even as she recovered, the shadow of betrayal followed her. Callan reached for her hand, giving it a firm squeeze. "Stay calm," he said. "We can get past them. We just have to move slowly and quietly." The enemy patrol passed nearby, their sensors sweeping the ground and the rocks. Nira held her breath, remembering every story of soldiers caught by surprise. But Callan's presence beside her brought a strange sense of security. He guided her movements, keeping her low, moving one careful step at a time. When the patrol finally moved past, Nira exhaled slowly. "That was too close," she whispered. Callan nodded. "It's not over yet. We need to keep moving until we're far from here." They continued through the narrow valley, the shadows of the cliffs stretching long in the morning light. Nira noticed how Callan constantly checked the terrain ahead, back, and to the sides. He stopped at every strange noise, every shift of the mist, alert to any sign of danger. At midday, they reached a small overhang that offered some shelter. They sat quietly, taking a moment to rest. Nira's body ached from the journey, but her mind was more alert than ever. She realized that surviving this world was more than avoiding wounds, it was reading the dangers, understanding them, and trusting each other to act at the right moment. "You've taught me something," she said, breaking the silence. "About humans, about courage. You don't just fight. You think. You protect. And you don't leave anyone behind." Callan looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. Then he smiled faintly. "It's what we do. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. You have a choice too. You can give up, or you can keep moving. I'll be here either way." The mist grew thicker as afternoon approached. Visibility dropped, and the shadows of the cliff seemed to reach out toward them. Suddenly, a noise erupted from above, a sharp crack as a rock dislodged and fell near their hiding spot. Callan grabbed Nira, pulling her to the side just in time. The rock shattered on the ground, sending dust and small stones scattering. "Careful," he whispered. "We're not alone." Nira's heart raced. She realized they were being tracked, perhaps even hunted. Her fear returned, stronger than before. But Callan's calmness grounded her. He assessed the situation quickly, looking for the best path through the mist. "Follow me," he said, leading her along a narrow ledge. The rocks were slippery, the mist cold against their skin. Every step had to be precise. Nira trusted him completely, knowing that one wrong move could mean disaster. Hours passed, the mist shifting like living shadows around them. Nira's strength wavered, but Callan encouraged her at every step. "You're doing fine," he said. "Keep your focus. We'll get through this." By nightfall, they had moved far enough from the patrols to find a small cave. Inside, it was dry and sheltered from the wind. Nira collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but alive. Callan sat beside her, his own injuries forgotten for the moment. "You were right," she said softly. "Survival isn't just strength. It's courage, trust, and hope." Callan nodded, placing a hand on hers. "And sticking together. That's the most important part." For the first time in days, Nero felt a sense of safety. The shadows had pursued them, testing their resolve, but together they had survived. And she knew that no matter what dangers lay ahead, they would face them as one. The firelight flickered against the walls of the cave, casting long, dancing shadows. Outside, the mist swirled, hiding the world in uncertainty. Inside, however, Nero felt a bond growing, one forged not by battle alone, but by courage, trust, and the unyielding will of one human who had refused to let her die. And in that moment, she understood something she had never known: survival was not just about living. It was about choosing to protect, to care, and to stand together, even when the shadows of the past and the dangers of the present threatened everything. The dawn on Zurich was quiet. Mist rolled across the valley, but the storm from the previous days had passed. Nira stretched slowly, testing her body. The ache in her side had eased, and her legs were stronger. The long nights of pain and fear were behind her thanks to the human beside her. Callan stirred, sitting up beside the small fire they had built inside the cave. His arm throbbed faintly, but he ignored it, scanning the misty valley for any sign of danger. Nira watched him quietly. She had followed him, trusted him, and survived because of him. And now, she was beginning to understand the deeper truth of what he had done for her. "You've changed me," she said softly, breaking the silence. Callan looked at her, raising an eyebrow. "Changed you?" "Yes," she replied. I I believed that strength meant winning, that survival meant leaving others behind. My people taught me that. But you showed me something different. Courage isn't just fighting. It's protecting, even when there's no reward. It's standing beside someone, no matter the danger." Callan nodded slowly. "That's what we call humanity. Not everyone understands it, and not everyone can do it. But when it matters, we try." Nira studied his face. The pain, the exhaustion, the endless responsibility he had carried, it was all there. And yet, he had never given up. He had chosen to protect her when everyone else had abandoned her. She realized that this choice, this courage, was what made humans remarkable in a way her people could never understand. "We must move soon," Callan said, breaking the moment. "Even if the patrols are gone, staying here too long is risky. The world is full of dangers, and we have to reach safer ground before nightfall." Nira rose carefully, testing her strength. "I can walk on my own now," she said. "Thanks to you." Callan smiled faintly. "I told you, you're stronger than you think. You just needed someone to show you that." They moved through the misty valley, Nira matching his pace. Each step reminded her of the long path they had traveled together, the nights of cold and hunger, the narrow escapes from enemy patrols, the endless trust she had placed in him. Every memory reinforced the truth she was beginning to accept: humans did not abandon those in need. They risked themselves for others, and in doing so, created bonds that could not be broken. By midday, they reached the edge of a small forest. Trees with twisted branches provided shade and cover, hiding them from distant patrols. Nira paused, looking back at the valley. The battlefield behind them was silent now, but she remembered the betrayal, the fear, and the endless pain. Yet none of that mattered anymore. "Look at this place," she said quietly. "It's peaceful." Callan glanced at her, then back at the forest ahead. "It's not perfect. But it's a start. A place where we can catch our breath before moving on." They rested under the trees, sharing the small rations Callan had carefully preserved. Nira noticed that he had grown quieter, more reflective, but his vigilance never wavered. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about preparation, about understanding risk, and about standing strong even when the odds were against you. As they ate, Neera spoke again, her voice soft but firm. I understand now. My people left me behind because they saw me as weak. But you saw me as worth saving. That is the difference. Humans, you measure strength not by power alone, but by courage, by heart, and by the choice to protect others. Callan's eyes met hers. You've learned quickly, he said. It's not easy for everyone. But once you understand it, you carry it with you forever. That's what makes us human. Neera felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had lived her life believing strength meant control, that courage meant never faltering. But now she knew the truth, true courage was selfless. True strength was choosing to stand by someone when all else seemed lost. And in that truth, she had found a new understanding not just of humans, but of herself. The sun climbed higher, casting dappled light through the trees. Neera and Callan continued their journey, moving cautiously but steadily. She felt stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. Every step reinforced the bond between them, a bond forged in fire, trust, and courage. For the first time since the battle, Neera smiled not because she was safe, but because she had learned a truth deeper than any lesson her people had ever taught her. Humans were remarkable not because of their weapons or strategy, but because of their courage, their loyalty, and their choice to stand beside those who needed them most. And as they moved forward through the forest, Neera understood something else as well. The journey ahead would be difficult, but with Callan by her side, she would face it with strength, courage, and hope. The forest opened onto a clearing, and Neera paused, taking in the sight before her. Beyond the trees lay a small human outpost, hidden from the main battlefield but fully equipped for shelter and recovery. The sight of it filled her with a strange mix of relief and disbelief. She had survived the impossible, guided and protected by a human who had chosen her when everyone else had abandoned her. Callan led her cautiously toward the outpost, scanning the area as always. Even now, after days of careful travel, his vigilance never faltered. Neera followed, her steps steady, though her heart raced with anticipation and nervousness. They'll help you, Callan said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. No one here will leave you behind. The gate of the outpost opened, and human soldiers approached, wary but ready to assist. When they saw Neera's condition, her bruises, her bandaged wounds, they moved quickly, offering water, medical kits, and warm clothing. She had never experienced anything like it. The humans treated her as if she belonged, not as an enemy, not as a curiosity, but as someone worth saving. Neera's eyes followed Callan as he spoke to the soldiers, giving instructions quietly and efficiently. She realized that the strength he had shown on the battlefield was not just physical. It was a quiet courage, the courage to stand by someone else, to act without hesitation when others had already walked away. As she was guided to a safe corner, Neera's thoughts drifted to her own people. She had been left behind, betrayed by those she had trusted most. They had abandoned her when she needed them, leaving her to die in the ruins of a battlefield that still smelled of ash and smoke. She felt a surge of anger, a bitter reminder of the cruelty she had endured. Yet standing beside her, Callan offered reassurance without words. His presence reminded her that she was not alone anymore. She had learned a truth that her people could never teach: courage was not measured by fearlessness or power, but by the choice to protect others, even when it was dangerous. Days passed at the outpost. Neera recovered, regaining her strength and learning to trust in the safety of the humans around her. She observed them carefully, the way they worked together, how each action was guided by concern for others, how even in small tasks, they looked out for each other. It was a different kind of strength, a strength she had never known among her own people. One morning, Callan approached her with a serious expression. It's time, he said. You need to face them. Your people. They need to see the truth. Neera's heart tightened. She had feared this moment, yet she knew it was necessary. She had survived because of a human's courage. Now she would return, not to fight, not to beg, but to show them what she had learned. The journey back was tense. Neera's mind raced with memories of betrayal, fear, and despair. Yet she felt stronger, steadier, and more confident than ever. With Callan by her side, she knew she could face whatever awaited her. At the council hall of her people, the silence was immediate. Eyes widened as she entered, alive and healed. Her commanders and soldiers looked at her, a mix of shock and uncertainty on their faces. Many had assumed she would never return. Many had assumed they were safe from judgment. Neera stepped forward, her voice calm but unwavering. I survived, she said, not because of strength alone, not because of strategy, not because of orders. I survived because one human chose to stand beside me when no one else would. A hush fell over the hall. The words were simple, yet carried a weight that silenced the murmurs of the council. They had abandoned her, left her to die, yet here she stood, alive, strong, and unbroken. Callan remained at her side, silent but resolute. Neera continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. He risked himself for me. He showed courage when all others turned away. He taught me what it means to protect, to trust, to care for another being beyond duty or fear. That is the difference between his people and ours. Her people remained silent, unable to speak against the truth she presented. The lesson was clear, undeniable, and painful. For all their strategy, their power, and their authority, they had lacked something essential: courage tempered with compassion, strength paired with choice. Neera felt a surge of clarity. She was no longer the abandoned one. She had learned a truth that her people could not teach, and she had been transformed by it. The courage of a human had not only saved her life but reshaped her understanding of strength and honor. As she left the council hall, Callan at her side, Neera realized something profound: the bonds humans formed were stronger than any command or hierarchy. They were built on trust, care, and the unwavering choice to stand beside others, even when danger loomed. Her people watched her go, silent, witnessing the power of a lesson they had failed to understand. Neera did not look back. She carried the human's courage within her, a force stronger than fear, betrayal, or despair. And she knew that wherever her path led, she would never forget the truth she had learned: courage is not measured by survival alone. True strength is found in the choice to protect, to care, and to stand beside those who need you most. And with that truth, Neera walked forward alive, unbroken, and forever changed.